Hello.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Hadar. And hi to everyone watching. We wanted to, we've been wanting to do this video for a few weeks now, a few
Yeah,
months.
and we're recording on a Thursday, which usually what we do on Thursday is watch the latest episode of Severance.
That's right. That's normally what we would have to look forward to.
But now it seems like we have to be the ones generating the content for the
Right.
Thursday
Because no
evening
one else is
entertainment.
talking about Severance, but
Yeah,
certainly there's no more episodes. There's been a lot of talk about this season, and we can't stop talking about it um, between each other. Or between ourselves. So we thought we would do a video to just kind of unspool some of the many, I think, complicated thoughts we have about this past season, season two, and the show uh, in general. And we should really start, I think, by stating for the record that we both identify as Severance fans.
sure. Please let me identify however I want. No,
Oh,
I'm
please. Okay,
kidding.
correct me if I'm
No,
wrong.
I'm a fan. I'm
I don't
definitely
want
a
to
fan.
misrepresent you.
I definitely am a fan. I think that Severance is really an incredible TV show. I'm someone who, in some ways, is very new to TV. I didn't really grow up watching a lot of TV, and only through the pandemic really started watching more TV and becoming really enamored by the worlds that can be created through that. And Severance just completely blew my mind in terms of its uniqueness, its social commentary. Like it was just so interesting. It was so philosophical, so psychological, so social. And yeah, it really grasped me, like, yeah, we really every Thursday had to watch the new episode. We couldn't even wait a day.
Yeah, no, it was very gripping. I had already seen season one when it came out 3 years ago, which is hard to believe. Um, and as season two was approaching, uh, I was very intent on watching once it dropped, and I wanted to bring you in, so I invited you to do for me, what was a rewatch of season one a few months ago. So maybe we can start with before we get into all of our various thoughts and feelings about season two. What were we feeling, looking forward to, expecting going into season two? Which another way of saying or asking that question is, what did season one leave you with? And for you, what was the essence of the show? What was the promise of the show? What mattered to
Yeah.
you about it? And obviously, watching any television show that's going to evolve over the course of multiple seasons, there's always the experience of, you have the opening season or a season you really love, and then you got to deal with the fact that they're going to press the reset button. They're going to do whatever they do in the next season. So going into this one, what were you looking forward to? How are you feeling about it? What were your impressions?
Yeah, so you rewatched season one with me. I was watching it for the first time, I guess, in December time, before season two dropped. And um, yeah, I mean, I think season one was just so well done. Um, Everything mattered, like every second of the what was happening had meaning and significance, and um, really just like pulled the audience forward. I mean, I remember sitting there and before the last episode, I was like, oh, Helly's going to be part of
Yeah,
the
you
Lumen
called it.
guy. I did call it. But yeah, I think to me, season one was very kind of Helly and Helena were just like the main character. It
Yeah.
started with her kind of being on the severed floor, and um, I really liked her rebellious innie. And, season one ended with this like really gorgeous cliffhanger around her Audi identity. And I was going into season two really expecting that relationship between Helena and Helly to be more drawn out, or to like see both of those characters more.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that she was going to be more the focus of
Mm-hmm.
season two, and not to say that she wasn't, because obviously there were so many scenes with her in it, either Helena or Helly. But I did, well, I mean, I guess maybe now
Yeah,
it's
let's
gonna
not quite jump ahead
okay.
to the season two, but let me uh sort of well, maybe I'll answer the question and then and throw it back to you. In terms of what, because you said the word philosophical.
Mm.
Yeah, let me actually ask you, what do you mean by philosophical? What were the themes?
Yeah.
What was the show about for you at its core? And what made it so unique and so whatever it was that you loved about it? And I'll
Yeah.
answer the same question.
Well, I'll start by saying that I teach spirituality
Okay.
and work a lot with different people. But, one of the kind of core aspects of the spiritual path is like, what do you do with your mind? What do you do with the egoic mind? What do you do with the monkey mind? What do you do with the mind? And I think
And
it's
what is the mind,
and
right?
what yeah, of course. But the mind is so often an obstacle
Hmm.
alongside the spiritual path, and especially like living in the U.S. You wrote a book about this.
Of
But
course.
just yeah, but the crisis of mental health issues is so extreme. Almost like people are just suffering so much from different um, mental health issues. And what this show did that was really interesting is like what happens when a person kind of gets a break from both their mental world and their emotional world and the trauma that
Mm,
is kind of through whether it's like losing a partner or whatever it might be, whatever issues you're struggling with, like what happens when you kind of get in some ways a second chance at having a different character, like what parts of you come out, which feels very resonant to the work that I do around spirituality, around like what parts are like your core soul self and what parts of you are conditioned or
mm,
trauma layers. So that I thought was so fascinating between like who's your innie and who's your outie, and in some ways like which one is more you.
mm,
But I also thought that this word that to me the show was really about. I mean, it was about so many things, but the layer that I was looking at it through was around dissociation,
mm,
of what happens when parts of us are dissociated, and that dissociation in some ways, right, creates a whole new existence and a whole new reality that is completely separate from what you could call the outie. um, and for a certain time that actually is really good, right, because dissociation helps us get through certain experiences. But then there comes a moment where you're like, actually, I want to get that part back. Like, I want to actually integrate that part of me that was dissociated back
mhm,
into the real life.
mhm,
And then that kind of journey of how you do that, which in some ways is like a very, psychosomatic, spiritual inquiry
mhm,
around what do you do with different parts of us that are dissociated and have whole different worlds of being. How do you integrate them into like one whole self? um, so, that's kind of the main lens that I looked at it through. Of course, there's also the class analysis and the union organizing analysis, which I also love around, yeah, the culture of work and how, so many people, and again, we're here in the US, but so many people kind of work these 9 to 5 corporate jobs where the work is important and mysterious. And
in quotes.
yeah. um, yeah, and just kind of like, I mean, this work life relationship and yeah, how many people want to just be able to like do their work and then come home and have their own life and have a totally different reality, and how in so many ways kind of corporate culture takes advantage um of that kind of discrepancies. But yeah, I want to
Hmm.
actually hear you talk about it more because I think you also have a
Yeah, I everything you said resonates for sure. The I mean the desire to reintegrate, they held off on that until a few episodes into season one. I mean, the only glimpse we got of someone opting for that path was Petey. And
right.
what Petey in season one I'm talking about, and what Petey was up to certainly seemed very dangerous. Dangerous and um, kind of against the rules, like dangerous both like biologically, physically, medically for him, but also extremely subversive.
Mhm.
Dangerous from the perspective of the corporation that wants to shut that down and deny that such a procedure, such a process of becoming a whole person once again, once you've chosen to dissociate, denying that that's even possible and trying to wipe out any evidence of it, to the point of one of my least favorite scenes in season one, uh, just because it's just so outlandish. You know, Cobell doing brain surgery on Petey's corpse at his wake or funeral or whatever. I mean, just everything about that was so implausible to me. The
Yeah,
fact
it was
that
a
she's
weird scene.
able to be in the back room alone with an unguarded cadaver and, you know, has this device and knows how to extract it. Of course, we find out in season two that she knows a lot about this procedure because she's in fact the creator of it. But back to season one, they stop short of the integration process for most people, except giving us a glimpse of, my God, it's hard to go back once you've dissociated, and that does resonate for me psychologically. The difference in between the world of Severance and ours, one of the many differences, is these people choose to dissociate consciously. um, the dissociation that you're describing in terms of it helping us survive, most of that happens just unconsciously in order to, and the nervous system does it. It's deliberate, you could say. It has a purpose, but it's not conscious on the part of like the personality or the self electing to do it, signing up for the surgery, signing their name away, and bearing that kind of direct kind of responsibility for their choice, and then the two personalities being completely divided from each other. And but what it does show in
I slightly
season one,
disagree with that, but
okay,
eh.
well,
Well, I think like, if you're someone who, let's say, uses like drugs or alcohol, I mean, those are just one example. It
yes,
could be TV. Like you're also choosing that. And I think
absolutely,
there's a lot of conscious choice around
fair enough.
dissociation.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. So yeah, I guess I was talking about like the deep core personality associations that we do early in life,
Hmm.
and we suppress certain parts of us and then we forget that they're there. But you're totally right. And that goes, and what you're saying goes to another thing I loved about season one is, yeah, a satire and in some ways, I guess, a critique of corporate culture, but more than just like the workplace culture. And of course, that's a huge part of the fun of season one, the claustrophobia of it, the fact that the entire innie world has no connection to the outside world and is so contained in this um, kind of absurd, meticulously curated, and very aesthetically quirky and yet ominous uh, specific corporate culture that looks like it's out of a whole bunch of decades at once, you know, from like the 1960s through to high tech now. Um, but in a broader sense, looking at the not the internal corporate culture only, but also the culture we're living in where corporations offer us technological solutions to the problems that they've in some ways created. So, or that the world of capitalism creates. So, are you alienated? Are you disconnected from others? Are you feeling sad? Are you depressed? Is your attention scattered? Um, well, we're not going to get to the root issues of why that is because there's no profit in getting to the root issues. But what we will do is sell you a product or a lifestyle or a brand or some new idea that will make it more tolerable, uh, more copable. And then on top of that, we're gonna, while you're easing the pain inside, we will extract your labor from you. And so part of why we're giving you these remedies for your ailments is so you can be a more efficient, productive, you know, fitter, happier, and more productive, as the Radiohead
Yeah.
track goes, you know. So all of those things I loved thematically, and then stylistically, it was just so stylish.
Yeah. But just one thing to say about what you were just speaking is also, in some ways, this critique of capitalism that this highly controlled work environment um, is in some ways depending on emotional dissociation.
Yeah.
That there's kind of an interest and um, between people being disconnected from themselves and people being quote unquote good workers,
Hmm.
and how much the kind of the capitalist machine or what you're speaking of, like this technological solutions to your like life issues that are trying to be sold to people are dependent on the workforce. And yeah, not necessarily this just like big ideas that someone has, but you actually need people who are showing up to work. And yeah, just thinking about the level of control that that takes, which is really shown in the in Severance as a the whole. I mean, both in season one and season two.
Yeah, and it's very smart that they um or at least it's a very bold choice that they decided not just to do some kind of evil corporation that makes evil things in the world or whatever, although we're still quite unclear by the end of season two, even what it is that Lumen makes. I know pharmaceuticals, it seems to be the sector that they're in, but we don't quite know what they're making aside from these chips that fracture people's personalities and fragment them. Um, but oh, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. That Lumen, they take it several steps further than just a corporation with a cult-like internal culture, which many corporations do. This kind of very insular um, and often very strange culture. You see the clips of Google and Apple executives rolling out their products for their employees and the dances and the weird inside jokes and all that. So that there's something insular and cult like, but they actually make Lumen a cult, a religious cult with this strange language of its own, this strange aesthetic, this very bizarre cosmology, completely um, centered on this mysterious founder of theirs and his whole lineage. Um, so they just take the the inherent kind of fascism of the corporate structure and they heighten it several degrees, which does lead into the stylistic boldness of the show. It's just nothing like you've ever seen before. Um, it's like, I don't know, Wes Anderson mixed with David Lynch or some other kind of dystopian fantasies. Science fiction creator. That's probably a bad comparison, but it was so original and it's so tightly controlled, but it also had a lot of looseness to it too, strangely. I guess the performances were so relaxed that I mean, so that's the other,
Great
like,
acting.
incredible acting, and there's still incredible acting. I mean, you could say that season two gave its actors considerable room to stretch out and show more of what they can do. Um, and in many ways, like just incredibly thrilling moments for each of them, really. Um, I think it was the ensembleness that we missed in some ways from season one to season two, but
Yeah.
we'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, we could spend this entire video just crowing
Praising.
about praising
Praise Kier.
season one, and but what we want to say is as we launch into our complicated feelings about season two, the show is still a unique,
Yeah.
singular, really cool achievement. And everything we're going to say about season two, the good and the bad, and the not sure, is coming from the perspective of people who love this world, love these characters, um, and I think in some ways wanted more of certain things, wanted less of others, and felt that some of the choices made in season two, as well as the expanded canvas, diluted some of the things we love, got in the way of other things, put the focus on certain questions that, while other questions were more
Yeah.
pressing for us as viewers, or at least for me.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting because one of the things that I really thought was so powerful about season one was just how relatable. Like all the characters were so relatable, on some level, whether it was like their innies and navigating work stuff or their outies, like trying to kind of escape or work through different um, life experiences. Like I just felt a lot of relatability. Um, and yeah, I think as we kind of start unpacking season two, to me, that was part of actually what was a bit lost because I started to feel like the world of Severance in some ways expanded, but all of a sudden it was less of like a speaking to the world as we know it, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree. Like on the one hand, the world became less relatable to me. Like I cared less about the world of it because it got so diffuse and the canvas got so big. On the other hand, I think they did a lot of work deliberately this year to because there was more of insight into each person's Audi,
Mm.
although not in a very balanced way. I mean, we learned very little about Irving's Audi, for instance. Things happened to him, but we didn't learn much about who he is.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd say Dylan became more well-roundedly relatable to me in season two.
Yeah.
And not only that, but characters who were just straight up villains or antagonists or foils in season one, like Milchick. They deliberately went out of their way to create a sense of internal conflict for him. Same thing with Cobell.
Well, let's break it down because
Yeah.
we want to get through actually all of it. So,
Yeah. So let's talk about
but
season two.
before we get in, I just remember that before after season one finished, and we were kind of talking about season two, and I remember I asked you like, do you think it's gonna live up? Like, what's and you were like, I don't know. It's really hard to make a good season two after you have such a strong season one.
I think I also said it's really hard to make a strong season two when all of the rules of the world that made season one so
Yeah,
intense have just been exploded through this amazing device in the final episode, the overtime contingency, that all of a sudden the wall, the separation wall, if you will, between in and out has been breached.
right.
The containment field has been yeah, breached. So how are you going to recreate the sense of pressure
Yeah.
that created that cauldron that made season one so amazing?
Yeah. And I personally thought that season two was just gonna be even better than season one. But yeah, I think, and we'll talk about, but just I do feel a bit disappointed in season two.
So
Um,
overall, what are you disappointed by?
well, so yeah, I mean, I think what I said earlier of like season one, the characters felt so relatable, and felt like normal human beings who are just, working through a world that is different from, how we live in our lives, but is very, very close. And I think in season two, the distance just got much greater and the characters had in some ways less depth. Like it feels like season two really put a lot of emphasis on the kind of beauty of filmmaking,
Hmm.
which was gorgeous, like stunning shots, incredible acting, a lot of experimentations with different styles of filmmaking. And that part was really, really beautiful. But it does feel like the plot was a bit missed. And, with season one, where every second mattered,
Yeah.
it felt like season two had a lot of different moments where it's like, why is this relevant?
Hmm.
And one thing I'll just say is that there were so many new characters that didn't make sense to me. I'm like, you had already such deep characters in season one. Like
Hmm.
the first episode starting with all these kind of new um like Mark's coworkers and like we just saw them in one episode and then
So
they were
yeah,
gone.
the replacement MDR team, Bob Balaban and Elia Shawkat and the Italian guy, very random, and
Yeah,
it felt to me like that was almost made because we got everything we needed to know about those characters in the trailer for season two.
right.
And they felt trailer made to me,
Yeah,
to coin a phrase. They felt like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if? But it's just kind of a one note joke. They show up in the first episode. We've already seen all of the quippable, quotable moments in the trailer where it's like, why are you a child? Because of when I was born. And that's Miss Wong. And we'll talk
yeah.
about her because she's another new character. But then very quickly, Mark dispenses with these characters and flexes whatever leverage he has and gets his coworkers back. And what was the point
And I
of that?
guess maybe you could argue that like the overall plot was like, oh, they were trying to just I don't know, kill off the characters and just fire the rest of the employee. And then Mark had to like fight to get his friends back. But it's still just like not that convincing of a plot line
Yeah.
because it's like, why would you spend all that time? So like they were new characters. Yeah, Miss Wong was a new character, which it's like her role felt a bit strange. I mean, there were interesting moments with her, but then they kind of just killed her off at the end.
I
Um,
guess you could say that her indirect function was to uh, pressurize Milchek's work experience, but I don't know that you needed a prim uh, 12-year-old
to do that.
who's, whose reason for being there is a mystery until he reveals that she's on a kind of the Wintertide Fellowship, which again, it's more lumen weirdness, and
Yeah.
I that's cool, and they tie it in with I think Cobell was a recipient of the same fellowship when she was young, but it's just more lumen lore. But her presence, her constantly being there with that spooky look that she has, and she's like antagonizing Milchick, but she's not really doing anything.
Yeah, and it just feels like it also all these new kind of characters come at the expense of feeling more deeply the characters that are already there. Like
Yeah.
what you said, Irving. It's like I would have liked to understand more of Irving's
Oh
both
my God.
Audi and Innie world. And sure, you okay, the other character that you got is Bert's husband. He was a new character. Or, Dylan's wife's a new character
Well, she's
and
the one of the exceptions to the rule for me.
she's good, yeah.
Her introduction,
But like
and
can
we'll
we
talk
just
about that plot line.
I just want to like list all the new characters so
Yeah.
we just can like see how many new
Okay,
characters
so
there were.
we got the four new
Like
coworker, or the three new
three new
coworkers who
coworkers.
would disappear after an episode.
Yeah.
Miss Wong,
Miss Wong.
Mr. Drummond,
Yeah. We got Gemma.
who and Mr. Drummond is necessary because they got rid of the other enforcer in season one. We got Gemma, although yeah, not a
She
new
was there,
actor,
but
but
now she,
now we get to see
yeah.
some of her
Cobell's sister.
and former co-laborer in child labor back home,
Uh-huh.
right? That
Right.
guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Who
Um,
else?
who else? Right. We said Bert's husband. I'm forgetting his name.
Fields.
Fields, right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it just felt like a lot of new characters. And it's like, I think picking some of them and carrying out that plot line, like maybe Cobell's sister was important because it brought more texture to Cobell, who's already a character from season one. But I think overall, when you kind of zoom out at season two, you're like, there are way too many characters and not enough depth and not enough like playing out. I also felt, and part of, what in season one was so strong was like the dialogue between characters, the relationship between characters. And I just felt like season two overall didn't have as much dialogue between characters. I wanted to see more of that. It felt like, especially at the end in episode nine, like so many things got kind of rushed through. It was like these different conversations. And I'm like, you could have stretched those out, like I want to see more how characters are in relationship to each other. So I think like the amount of new characters was just a miss for me because it was kind of at the expense of deeper. And, for me personally, I really wanted to see more of Helly and not just, I mean, we'll get to her, but like I wanted to understand more her world. I wanted to understand even more Helena's world. And I feel like there could have been way more depth there as opposed to just bringing in these new characters.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that the new characters are to blame for the lack of depth you're pointing to. I completely feel you on wanting more of, I mean, certainly more interaction between the four coworkers.
Yeah.
You can maybe count on one hand. I guess the Ortbo, episode four literally is going to be the last time we see all four of them together because of what happens to Irving at the end. But prior to that, there was just virtually none of the camaraderie or the competition or the arguing or just the boring um, day-to-day work life. I didn't see them refining anything. They were just free to roam the halls, and they were all just kind of scattered to the wind. which after their incredible and gutsy coming together at the end of season one as a team to do
Yeah.
something really radical and revolutionary. The first episode tries to do so much and tries to basically rearrange all the furniture into a new configuration. So what it has to do is to basically fill them in on what's happened since the OTC, create this whole new Lumen reform culture.
Which that is
Such
like relatable in corporate culture.
it is, but it was too easy,
Yeah.
it seemed to me. Like, and it was kind of again played for a bit of a joke with that instructional video. But what's life actually like at the new Lumen? We barely get to see it.
Well, the
They
new
don't seem,
Lumen also fell apart. Like Milchek doesn't seem to have any control over them.
there's no supervision, except they're only all they care about is what Mark's up to.
Right.
Um, I guess that makes sense because he was the only one they cared about, and he only brought the others back because he wouldn't work um, otherwise. But yeah, that sense of the workplace being a pressure cooker. Now the workplace is just this strangely quiet. It feels like an office that's kind of closed for the holidays, and they happen to be there just kind of skulking around doing whatever they want.
Oh, and they met the goat people, which are also new characters.
The goat people are also new characters, right? And then there's of course the nurse
Right,
downstairs on the
right, right.
testing floor and the doctor and all
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, so maybe we should now zoom in more specifically on the individual character
Yeah,
plot lines
sure.
and see how we felt about each, because I certainly had differing feelings. But just to finish my thought, it's not to me that the other characters got too much play necessarily. Like I think they could have introduced that many characters, but it really is just how much real estate you give to each, and then how do you spend your time? How do you allocate the episodes? Where are we focusing? Um, Somehow in season one, they managed to move things along at a nice pace and have a lot of moments of not much happening, but something was happening. Um, so yeah, just something about allocation of chronological real estate that didn't, it was just felt really jerky to me in season two, to the point where the episode nine that you mentioned was such a relief to me
Yeah.
because it felt like this ensemble episode. Not that everyone was together in the same room, but we were really, everyone felt important and something was happening for everybody.
Right. Yeah, everyone was getting some airtime and their plot lines were also developed more. And for me, actually what I thought was powerful about season one is that you saw a little bit of the outer world and then a little bit of the inner world. And, even though, as you were saying earlier, that, we only saw Petey's reintegration and how intense that was, we as the viewer or the observer were seeing both the inner world and the outer world together.
Yeah, we were integrated.
We were integrated, we were playing God, if you will, right? Kind of watching.
Oh, except God would have been able to tell us what the goats were for, and
That's
there were
true.
still a lot of mysteries. But
Um, but I just felt like season two really focuses like, is it the innie world or is it the outie
well, they
world?
start the season that way, and I was immediately disappointed. I mean, I get why they did it.
Yeah.
I understand as filmmakers why they would be like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool to do a first episode all on the inside and a second episode all on the outside?" I get that impulse,
Yeah, but then it's, okay, sorry, go ahead.
but it does set up. I was already feeling a kind of like, "Oh shit, if they can do that."
What else can they do?
What else are they planning to do that's going to mess with what makes the show so special? And because they weren't going back and forth, there was just a lot of people explaining things to each other
Yeah.
without illuminating much in those first two episodes. It felt like I was worried that like the real estate was just not being occupied by enough interesting things.
Yeah, it makes me think about this ongoing conversation in religious tradition, but in some ways Lumen is a religious cult, so it's relevant. But
As
between
is Severance fandom.
yeah, that's true. Between tradition and innovation, where you really want to find the sweet line where you're continuing the tradition, but you're also innovating a bit.
Yep.
And it felt like season two lost some of the tradition of season one
Mhm.
and innovated like way too much
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Um,
It actually
you
felt
know,
like a season four to me.
yeah, like A with the new characters, but also with the as you were saying, okay, like one episode all innies, one episode all outies, but then it's like okay, one in this, there were so many episodes that was like Cobell's world, Gemma and Mark's world, like
The Ortbo.
the Ortbo, like
Yep.
just specific episodes, and I feel like maybe you can get away with like one or two in a season, but to just have so many, and I think that's why episode nine for both of us was such a relief because it was like, wow, all right, everything together
That's
finally.
right.
It just felt a bit too experimental and um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that just didn't work for me.
it worked for a lot of people, and you can see it in the comments um, on Twitter and Reddit, and you can hear it in the filmmakers talking about it, um,
Yeah,
which was, oh, we were really excited to try this or to use this kind of filmmaking. And when people start talking about, oh my God, Ben Stiller switched to 16 millimeter for that show, I don't know anything about cinematography, and it kind of misses me. Like I don't get excited so much by formal inventions. Like if I'm not excited by what it's doing for the story and for the characters, then those things are actually gonna more likely to take me out.
yeah,
If like I'm sure my favorite shows or shows that kind of were really exciting at the time, like Breaking Bad or The Wire or whatever, I'm sure there were plenty of moments where something technical was done that hadn't been done before. But because it was done to serve a plot or character moment that was so right for the moment, the technology, the craft becomes transparent. I'm
yeah.
not seeing the craft. I'm seeing the story and I'm experiencing it a new way. It's like someone slipped me a psychedelic, but I don't know. So I'm just experiencing it in an enhanced way. That's what I want. What I don't want is be like, oh, wow, those filmmakers really had a complicated shoot on this episode.
Well, I mean, I think you're also speaking, what I was saying about the relatability of season one, which is in some ways kind of this more class consciousness, organizing the workers' class. And all of a sudden, it kind of felt like this gentrifying thing where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
only the artists get to know, or only the artists get to speak. And it's like this more kind of elitist world that felt very different, after each episode you had to kind of go on Reddit to understand what even happened and now find all these hidden clues and hidden meetings and and this and that. And I think it became, the form and the style. There was so much stunning imagery. And yeah, it was really, really beautiful. And I felt like the actual storyline and the depth was compromised. It felt too much like beauty art without enough connection to like the characters felt flattened a
Yeah.
bit. So
We're Severance populists, basically.
yeah,
Severance for the people.
exactly.
No, I think that's right. It did feel, for lack of a better term, more like it felt like a lot of moments in season two were made. It felt like season one was made. It was world building, and it was just we're gonna build this world because it's just a really cool puzzle. Season two felt aware that people were watching.
Yeah.
It felt like many moments were made almost made for Reddit. Not really Reddit, maybe, but definitely made for the Severance podcast to talk about. Made for the behind the scenes little clips at the end, like stuff that the filmmakers really want to explain and talk about, or made for the memes, like the marching band in the final episode. To me, it was just like, how well um, the what was it called? The music dance experience from season one went over. You know how that's become a meme with, Milchick grooving around with the funky, mod lighting or whatever, and the defiant jazz. That was so cool and so original and so of that world. But it did expand the world a bit, but it really felt like it was of it. It felt very controlled. like very tightly controlled, which is so funny because it's supposed to be defiant jazz. Like here's some anarchy for you. Like,
Yeah.
but the marching band is just an example of like, okay, now that the internet is watching, now that people love this show, what can we give them that's going to remind them of the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl show? Now I know that this season was filmed long before the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl show, but it had that vibe of like people will be memeing this, people will be clipping this. We'd love to see Tremel Tillman, the actor playing Milchick. We'd like to give him a baton and a marching band and see what he can do. And we need some distraction from Mark and Helly. How big can we make this? And the same thing with the Ortbo episode. Like,
Which also made no sense, by the way, the marching band, because it's like, how do you have, first of all, how is Milchik just like running this whole band that was a lot of people of color as he's this whole season he's been, where are these severed kind of musicians kind of coming from? And B, like, why would you as Lumen invest so much in that and not in security? Like, how did Mark just like when they were talking about Mark going to save Gemma, I'm like, there's no way he can get through it. And fine, you had this like funny scene with Mr. Drummond, like that was maybe more believable,
yeah,
but that there was like so little rest of security at this like
totally.
clearly the best day of Lumen history. It just doesn't. It's not
And
believable.
where is the music, the movement and choreography department stationed, and why have we never heard of them? Now I know we're asking questions that are like realism based, and this is not a realism based show. I mean, there was a fucking baby goat in season one. We already know this is a weird place, but to me, like that was actually one of my core worries about season two going into it. Um, that given that anything can happen, just because anything can happen in this world doesn't mean anything should happen. Doesn't mean everything should happen.
Yeah, it lost a bit of its like own logic in a way
That's
because
right.
it's like
And that's a tenuous thing because its logic was very odd. It's quite impressive that they were able to create any logic at all inside this absurd world. But that's just such a tricky thing. How do you honor the rules of your world while expanding it to anyway, I think
yeah.
we've taken this point as far as we need to. So yeah, let's try to break down the individual characters and storylines in the time we have left. So Mark S, Mark Scout, how did you feel about his story? It was clearly he was always the quote unquote main character. We knew the most about his Audi going into this season.
Yeah. I feel bad because the first word that comes to mind is like boring. And not to say that his character is boring. I think his character is super interesting, actually. Um, yeah, and maybe this kind of ties back into the Helena. I mean, one of the things that I actually liked about season one is that it didn't have sex or love in it. And in some ways, that was what brought me into the world more because it was like, oh, finally, it's not just like stupid TV. That's just like a stupid rom com thing and this love story or this sex thing. And there's just so much TV that's made of that.
Yeah.
And this felt like kind of deeper about like who are we as humans, like
Hmm.
it, and that is what drew me in.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
And I feel like in this season, Mark was just really tied. I mean, he was also in season one, but you got a little bit more of his life. It just became either really about Gemma or really about Helly or about Helena. Like it, I don't know. I just feel like it became more of like this love story. Um,
And that's how they tried to make it quote unquote relatable, but you were already finding it relatable without that extra like
yeah, like I want to understand more about his grief.
yeah.
I want to understand more about his pain of loss. I want to understand more like yeah, that like his emotional world and like that has been as opposed to like okay, we'll fight to get Gemma and then everything will be better and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
I'm like that still feels like the stage of grief of like denial, like and of course the storyline is that she's still alive and then but I guess I just felt like I wanted more about his emotions in some ways and it also just like didn't really make sense to me as to like why would he still be going to work working on refining the data, why wouldn't he before he like found out that that's what you know why would he still just be engaging in the work? Like it just made no sense after everything that happened in season one. They just kind of came back and just got back to work. I mean, it's not just we saw kind of what happened, but still that there wasn't like deeper questions and then when Helena was revealed to be Helena, not Helly, it was just kind of like, okay, you know, I mean, there were
The comments are gonna be like screaming, "It's Helena, not Helena."
oh Helena, oops, sorry. English is not my first language. Um, but anyways, like yeah, I mean there were it's not that there weren't moments where they were addressing that because at first, yeah, Mark is angry at that, but um
And I think his Audi decides to go back to work because of this mystery of Gemma.
yeah.
Devin convinces him that he's got to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
don't know. What did you think of
or
him?
no, it's the other way around. He's the one who's going to go, and she's saying, "What the hell are you doing? They're evil."
Right.
And she's like, "She was in my life too." And he's like, "Yeah, but your sheets didn't smell like her." That was a
Oh,
good scene.
by the way, another kind of character. I mean, I know Rickon was around in season one, but then that random book deal with
Yeah,
Natalie, like that just went nowhere.
it went nowhere.
And it's just like, yeah, I feel like there was also just like all these,
That's again another example of them trying to do too much.
it's just like random things that it's like, why are we watching this if this has no significance for the overall plot line?
Yeah, it's disappointing that I mean he managed to be have such an effect on season one. He's not my favorite character, but just a plot point that gets lost. There were a number of storylines that got sort of explored and then just lost. And for me, the biggest one, and this one relates to Mark, is reintegration.
Yeah.
Really,
Oh, yeah.
to
Yeah.
me,
We didn't even
a
talk about that.
very disappointing because you want to talk about exciting filmmaking. I thought that the show was really on strong ground when, and that was when I was like, "Ooh, shit!" You know, Ben Stiller's really expanding his palette, and the that was an example of the craft being transparent, like I said, because it was serving this thing that we actually didn't think we'd get to see so early, which is Mark going through the reintegration process with Ragabi showing back up and all this. So that first sequence at the end of, I think, guess episode three, where we start to see him flashing between the two, something we'd seen Petey go through, is exciting because, well, it's just exciting to travel between worlds. It's also exciting because it's dangerous to him,
Yeah.
and it's exciting because it's dangerous for the corporation.
Right. And I think all the stuff around reintegrations, that's also when things kind of stopped making sense a little bit with like, okay, Ragabi. And first of all, I mean, that part can make sense, but it is confusing for me a bit as a viewer that Devin and Mark are working together, you know, to start try to like burn it into his eye so he can see and you know all these things. And then Mark just chooses to get reintegrated and doesn't tell her. That part felt weird to me.
Yeah.
But fine, okay, that's a choice you can make. But then that moment where Devin kind of walks in and finds out about everything, and then she's like, "I'm gonna call Cobell," and where Gabi just leaves, like,
And we never hear from Ragabi
and we
again.
never hear from her again. It's like that just it was so messy and just didn't fully make sense that Ragabi would just like do this operation and also just like let him run up, like,
Yeah, and then all the reintegration phasing in and out kind of stops happening. He has a
yeah,
big coma.
totally,
He has a long enough fucking, you know, power nap for us to have an entire episode of flashbacks about him and Gemma while he's totally conked out. This is a medically dangerous, perilous thing, especially with the way she's doing it in his basement with all this
yeah.
crappy equipment and she's all stressed out. And then all of a sudden, he's kind of just fine enough for the last few episodes for
To
it
like
not.
take a road trip, even. Can you imagine?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, and the only times that he's flashing in and out seem to have to do with like it's triggered by romance or sex.
Hmm.
Like it's during the love scene with Helena at the Ortbo that he has a single flash of Gemma or whatever, as
But
if
that
the
was also
entire
early on
what's that that
as
was early
well.
on. It doesn't happen much later.
Yeah.
And given that, like you and I said, part of the spiritual and psychological excitement of the show is what happens when two parts of a self have been cleaved apart and then they start to come back together. Um, that to me got subsumed in favor of uh, which Mark is going to win and which chick is he going to end up with? Which
Yeah.
leads us into Helena, um, who maybe
Well,
we talk about next.
before there's like yeah, I think I read this critique that like, in the first season it was very much like, okay, the innies in this team of four like wanting to find out more about Lumen and kind of us against this big corporation. And all of a sudden now season two is about like the innie versus the outie
Yeah.
and like people fighting themselves as opposed to like losing track of like what caused them to have this disconnection in the first
Yeah, like
place.
Irv is strangely the only one who has maintained that kind of
Yeah,
anti-establishment.
totally.
Uh,
Irv's my favorite character.
oh, he is, and I had a sense that he would have a smaller role this season, but I think it's to the show's detriment
Yeah,
that he
100%.
because there's just the gravity of having that older performer, John Turturro, who's just one of the best actors in the world, um, playing that role, such a sweet role. But let's not
Yeah.
jump to him.
Well, just about Mark
Yeah,
and what you were saying about reintegration is that, yeah, like, it was really powerful to have reintegration happen so early on in the season and then having all these flashbacks. But then, yeah, he almost like he had a stroke or whatever it was. And then he basically got up and Devin took him to like see Cobell and he was fully his outie self.
right. And he has that. He's like, "Wow, I just had brain surgery in my basement," and like
Yeah,
kind of just ironic line. He just
it's kind of less believable, and I feel like the last two episodes didn't have any flashbacks between innie and out. Like they kind of spent this whole season building up to this reintegration, this innie Mark, this outie Mark, this reintegration, and then at kind of the last two episodes it's just like, well, they're really just as far apart as can be.
well, now they can talk to each other on a camcorder.
Yeah, which was
Now they
also
can
weird.
send, now they can be pen pals. I mean, you would think with this complicated rescue operation that both Audi and Innie Mark need to execute, which is very, the ticking clock, which again, it's a weaker, to me, it's a weaker version of what season one ended with, which was another ticking clock
Yeah,
limit. Someone noted that Dylan's only function in season finales is to keep doors closed
yeah,
because he blocks Milchick in the bathroom with the vending machine. But you would think it would be exciting during this like limited time operation if integration stuff kept glitching in and fucking with it.
yeah.
Like if Audi Mark,
Like is on the testing floor, and all of a sudden he's
you know,
getting like, yeah.
and they're at odds with each other in real time. It
That's kind of what I'm saying about the plot kind of not make following its own logic anymore because I feel like season two had all these and the reintegration is one of them. It's like developing these plot lines, then just like completely abandoning them and pivoting in a whole other direction. And it's just a bit kind of confusing because you're like, well, we were following this reintegration and now it's kind of innie and outie are completely separate. And I don't know. It just it stopped being also for me again. It keeps coming back. It just lost its relatability because, as you said, when there's no more rules and you could just do anything, then me as a viewer is like watching something where I'm like, all right, there's no like I'm kind of losing my buy-in in a way.
Yeah, and I was noticing all the discourse online. People were buying in more and more because they were investing in, oh my God, Mark and Gemma had such a beautiful life together. Oh my God, they were so cute. It was basically this extended meet cute where we get to see how sexy they are together. Like they are an attractive couple, and they did have a nice northeastern looking upper middle class
Yeah, it was like
young
cute.
hip life together, but I didn't care.
Yeah,
I didn't care. It's all flashback. I find flashbacks on TV shows always try my patience. Um, it was vibes, and it was like pleasant vibes. And it gave us some information. I mean, the great thing about that episode was seeing what Gemma was going through now, which was almost too painful to watch.
yeah.
Um,
And also just to say about reintegration, it would have been to me instead of just like keeping an episode for the flashback, an episode for this, an episode for that. If all of those were
integrating the show.
intersect, like if Mark, any Mark,
Yeah,
was having, part of his reintegration experience was actually having flashbacks to
correct.
that. that would have been to me more interesting.
Yeah.
And especially even if he was having flashbacks to that as he's trying to save Gemma when he's on the severed floor,
Yep.
that would have been really interesting. When he's seeing Helly and all of a sudden he's seeing Gemma crying
Hmm.
because of, the fertility issue, or just a bit more like it just felt like a lot of things were flattened.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, well, this now is Innie and that's an Audi and that's his world and I'm like, but the whole premise of this season seemed to be about the complication of those two.
That's right. Speaking of complicated, we got Helena Helly, and we have a lot to say about
Yeah,
her because I know she was your favorite.
she definitely
Probably
was. I'm
was.
wearing orange in honor of her.
Yeah. I mean, she was up there for me. Such a great performance by Britt Lauer. And like I said about the actors, one of the advantages of this season with the imagination of it is they really asked their actors to do
Yeah,
some new things, and she did some amazing work. And yet,
I'm gonna go on a little rant here if
go
that's
for
with
it,
your permission.
please.
um, well, first
A
I'll
rant
say,
is available upon request.
yeah, um, I will say that in general, I think women's characters on TV, even though we are have many women characters on TV and there's representation and all of that, there's still a long way to go about actually portraying women's complex internal world and specifically women's anger. I think that, and society in general very much represses women's anger. And that's something that a lot of women have to do is in some ways cut off the rebellious parts of them. And one thing that I found that was so powerful about Helly is that, she was really letting that part of her, like she just didn't give a fuck, not about anything. And she was just, really letting her rebellious, angry parts of her come out. And it was so refreshing as a woman to just be like on a screen watching that, especially, her three other workers or men. And she's kind of the only woman on the macro data refinement cubicles. So yeah, just to kind of see this like woman who like doesn't care how she walks, doesn't like it's very in that spirit. Um, Felt really compelling. And then it feels in a way like they kind of killed her character this season.
Mm.
They made it all about love.
Hmm.
And that to me feels, especially as a feminist, just feels so sad because so often women's emotional experiences just are like, well, just channel it into a boy,
Right.
channel it into a man. And it just felt like it kind of fell for that, where it's like we had like these few moments where all of a sudden she found out that like her Audi was using her and all this stuff. So she was a bit angry, but then we just see her like kind of crying in a corner.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people was like, wow, that's so beautiful. She's really being there with her emotions. But it actually felt like it was very pacifying to me.
Yep.
It felt like it was very, in some ways, regressing and repressing. And I wanted, with Mark, we really see this polarity between the innie and outie. And with Helly, you just have this like last line that she tells him. She's like, oh, well, I'm really her too about Helena. And it's just so confusing because I'm like, they're the ones who should be even more of the poles of each other. Um, but yeah, so I just felt like disappointed that so much of her character, it's fine maybe for Helene. How do you say her name?
Helena.
Helena. For
Emphasis on
Helene.
hell.
Fine. Helena. It was fine maybe for Helena to be interested in Mark, right? Because she's kind of growing up with this dad that's very controlling and she clearly has a wound around masculine love and, all this. So that felt, believable in terms of a plot line for her to then be like, okay, I actually want to feel love and I'm attracted to Mark. But to have that same plot line for Helly felt really strange.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, how does Helly end season one? She ends season one, you know, with her coworkers doing this OTC, but all of a sudden she wakes up alone, as she knew she would, on the outside. She didn't know where she'd wake up. She wakes up at a Lumen board meeting or conference or something like that, product launch, and she realizes who she is. Shock of a lifetime. And she fucking steps up and she says to Cobell right in her face, I'm going to burn your fucking company to the ground. And then she gets out there and she gives this incredible whistleblowing speech, uh, the ultimate in mutiny, you know? Now, we have to account for the fact that the filmmakers chose to actually remove her. They did write her character out for the first several episodes because it turns out we're not seeing her.
Which in some ways speaks to maybe they were actually afraid of how powerful her anger is. So then when they finally brought her back, that she was so subdued, felt so sad.
Very possibly, but either way, they robbed us of that character and they did diffuse her anger for quite a while. Um, I get the impulse to do a switcheroo, like, oh wow, it's actually Helena, but I thought that they kind of blew their wad, so to speak, a little too early on that one. Because after there, where do you go? Um, I was, the feminist in me, such as it is, wanted her to be more mad at Mark for having had sex with Helena, uh, not just angry at Helena for using my body, but like plausibly like imagine you had a twin, and your partner slept with your twin. Be like, well, I didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Really? You didn't know the difference? And Mark's weirdness to her, she says stop acting like an asshole, but once he's nicer again, she's just like, well, I want some Mark too in my life, and then they
Which
go off
again
and
is so unbelievable
yeah.
because that's true for Helena, who's like has this whole thing around masculine father, masculine love partner. But for Helly, she's so unbound by
Yeah.
those like she doesn't have those attachments as much. So to all of a sudden make her have those attachments just felt
Well,
wrong.
oops. We got cut off at that point and tried to restart, but it was like an awkward syncing up with where we'd been at in the conversation before we got interrupted. And this video is already, we think, long enough. So we're going to end it there and pick up where we left off in part two, which we hope you will tune into. And hopefully you can click right here somewhere and go straight to that. All right. Thanks for tuning in. See you in part two.